Well, it's really great to be here. I kind of love both Barcelona and Avalanche, so it's great to be here. How did you guys like the Bitcoin announcement? I was surprised about it, but it's awesome. I know this is like the last section of the day, so I'll keep this informal. And let's see if I can click the button. Maybe not. I'll just... We're good? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. So, I don't know if you expected to hear a talk about Bitcoin in an Avalanche conference. And if someone's going to do that, I feel like I need to give you some history. So, just so that I can know where I'm standing, like, maybe raise your hands. Who's been in the space in 2018, let's say? Okay, well, that's a lot. Okay, what about 2016? That's a lot too. What about 2014? Okay, yeah. Why are you still here? Okay, so I'm gonna talk about something closer. I'm gonna talk about 2018 a little bit. This is supposed to be me. So, you know, we go back to 2018, and this was like the very end. This was January 2018. That was the very end of the last kind of bull run. And CNBC, Fast Money, I hope there are no Ripple fans here. I might embarrass you a little bit. So they decided to give a tutorial on why or how you can buy Ripple. And it sounds like it should be something easy, right? Like you go to an exchange and buy Ripple. But apparently, back then, you couldn't just go to an exchange and buy Ripple because on Coinbase, they only listed Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin maybe. And if you wanted to buy Ripple, you had to go on this weird exchange, Poloniex, which was popular back then, and deposit Bitcoin. This was supposed to be a small amount, I guess, 10 BTC. But anyways, so you had to deposit Bitcoin after you bought it on another exchange, transfer it to a new exchange, buy Ripple on there, and then you end up with Ripple. And it's interesting because up until that point in time, up until around 2018, Bitcoin was sort of the reserve currency of the entire crypto space. Like when people would trade on exchanges like Poloniex, they would usually do that to increase their Bitcoin holdings and not so much to increase their dollar holdings. And there was a reason for that. Like in 2018, Coinbase or the other big established exchanges perhaps didn't have the compliance in place to add all of these tokens yet. And on the other hand, these smaller exchanges like Poloniex, they could not do all of the infrastructure and all of the work needed to get bank deposits, like US dollar bank deposits from banks. So they needed to do this trick where you would buy Bitcoin someplace, transfer it somewhere else. And of course, this was kind of solved with stablecoins later on. So what the stablecoins do, they take care of everything related to the traditional financial system, and the exchange can use the stablecoin instead of trying to get people to buy Bitcoin. And that works fine for centralized exchanges. That's okay. Stablecoins are centralized, but the centralized exchange is centralized as well, so that's fine. We didn't lose much. But when we're talking about decentralized finance, of course, stablecoins are very useful, they're very convenient, but I think most of us will probably agree that they can't be the only thing that keeps the whole thing intact. We probably need some other forms of currency to use. And in the days that people would only run smart contracts on, let's say, only on Ethereum, then it would have made sense to use ETH as the currency for that. But now that we're talking about a multi-chain world, I'm not sure it makes sense to use ETH in an app that spans multiple blockchains. And I think that Bitcoin, because it's neutral, because it doesn't belong to any of the layer ones, then I think it can have a very interesting role in that going forward. So I want to talk about how we can build with Bitcoin in a multi-chain world. And kind of in the Bitcoin community where I come from, we talk a lot about building on Bitcoin. When we say building on Bitcoin, we mean building on the Bitcoin blockchain. Except the Bitcoin blockchain isn't really meant to be built on. It's meant to be this very stable, rigid thing that really only exists in order to make sure that Bitcoin itself is a very, very safe, secure asset that is neutral and doesn't change. So we kind of want the Bitcoin blockchain on purpose to be extremely limited. So it's really not great to be built on. There are some projects like Lightning that are great and built on the Bitcoin main chain, but that's not what it's for. So I don't think that's the way to go if we want to bring Bitcoin into this world. And instead, there are two things I think we can do. One is build for Bitcoiners, which means build for people who consider themselves Bitcoin holders and they have needs. We're talking about 100 million people who hold almost $1 trillion in value, and they need all sorts of products. So just building for them on other chains. And the other is building with Bitcoin, building whatever it is that you want to build on a blockchain like Avalanche, but using Bitcoin's unique properties to enhance whatever it is you're building, maybe without your users even knowing that Bitcoin is used. So let's start with the first one, which is building for Bitcoiners. Really what we want is to see if there's this group that we can serve and build products for that is underserved right now, and just give them what they need using other blockchains. So people who consider themselves Bitcoin-only people, usually what they want, first of all, they want a Bitcoin-denominated balance. So they want to know that their balance isn't going to be volatile versus Bitcoin. And they get in, they use the app, they get out, they have the same number of Bitcoin. They won't have less because some price of some coin changed. They want to use the wallets they already know. We're talking about people who've been here for a while maybe, or they just joined, but either way, they don't even know what MetaMask is. So we want them to use the wallets they know and not to learn new tools. And we want them to not probably use new extra tokens for gas because that just adds complexion. So I'm going to show you how we're going to build an app like that very, very quickly. There's a very recent example from the last week or so of a big Bitcoin-based mixing service that uses a technique called CoinJoin. And the company running it had to kind of shut down, or not shut down, they had to start censoring some of the transactions coming in because they were deemed illicit. And of course, that's a problem if you're running a mixing service. If you have to start blocking transactions, that's kind of a problem. That made a lot of noise. It was actually a pretty popular tool. And the main problem, the reason this happened is because of the limitation of the Bitcoin blockchain, they had to run a server that will do some coordination between participants. And this sounds like a very obvious place where you can just plug in another service that is a little more distributed, that has less, less pressure points, and that uses uses the centralized blockchain instead of relying on a server. And then if we can still give those users the same service that they had, the same experience they had before, then maybe they can just migrate to the better tool. So an example would be something like Tornado Cash that's available on Ethereum. Just raise your hands how many people used Tornado Cash before. So all of you failed right now. I don't know why you're telling me that. The point of Tornado Cash is to be like private, to give you anonymity, and now you just told me you did that. No, I'm kidding. It's actually a good idea for everyone to mix their coins, because if everyone does it, then it's not something bad, right? Anyways, so the way Tornado Cash works, you use it like any other EVM app, and you go and you can deposit WBTC, wrap BTC even. But the thing is that the experience is very foreign for people who are used to Bitcoin and aren't used to smart contract chains. You would connect your MetaMask, deposit a standard amount of coins. You will receive what they call a secret note that you will use later for withdrawals. And the idea is, once your coins are inside this pool, then over time they quote-unquote mix, and by the time you pull them out, it will be impossible to make a connection between the coins that came in and the coins that came out. Okay, so what's the problem here? The main issue is if you're asking someone who's used to Bitcoin to use this thing, then now they need to learn about MetaMask, which honestly they don't have any experience with. And that's a bad start if what you want is to serve Bitcoiners. For better or worse, this is the user interface that Bitcoiners are used to. This is what most exchanges support. You have your wallet in your phone, and you have your whatever service you're using, and it's going to show you a QR code, and you scan it, and you send it, and that's it. So what if we could give that experience? And it turns out we can. So with there are multiple types of Bitcoin bridges that support multiple chains. One of them is REN, that supports both Avalanche and Bitcoin. And the nice thing about it is you can encode a Bitcoin address that eventually will execute an actual smart contract transaction on another chain like Avalanche. So first tokenize your Bitcoin as the first step, then actually execute an Avalanche transaction that will go into maybe a Tornado Cash pool, do the entire process. User gets a secret note that it needs to keep, and then when the user comes back later, they can use the secret note and deposit all the way back to a native Bitcoin wallet. So what I'm actually saying, you don't need to have MetaMask for that. You don't need to learn about smart contracts. You don't even have to know that you use smart contracts in the process. You do a deposit with Bitcoin like you would do with any other service. The whole thing goes through. Whenever you're ready, you take your Bitcoin out into another address, you're done. So that's what a nice experience would have looked like if the point is to address specifically Bitcoiners. And I think a service like that can beat the other, Bitcoin mixers easily. And it's unstoppable. So the other thing that apps can do on multiple chains, other than trying to address the needs of Bitcoiners specifically, is really, you can build whatever you want, whatever DAO you want, whatever protocol you want. But I think that for many of them, having Bitcoin in the treasury for your protocol makes a lot of sense, especially if the app that you're building is multi-chain and isn't limited to one chain. When you are limited to one chain, and if you're building an app only in Ethereum, it definitely makes sense for your protocol to hold a lot of ETH. But if you don't want to have that single point of failure of one chain, then I think that having, definitely as part of the treasury, an asset that is credibly neutral, that is censorship resistant, and is honestly, because it's the most liquid and resilient, you just know it's going to be there in 2 years, in 10 years, and 20 years. So as a certain portion of a treasury for really any protocol, I think that Bitcoin can make a lot of sense. And for some of them, it makes a ton of sense. So just in the last week or so, the Terra Foundation made an announcement that they're going to start acquiring Bitcoin as a backing for the UST stablecoin. And that just makes a lot of sense, because you would want to use something like Bitcoin, which again is credibly neutral. No one can stop you from using it, as opposed to, let's say, backing your stablecoin with another stablecoin, which is a problem. That happens actually in multiple places. But if you try to back your stablecoin with another stablecoin, then now you're relying on a competitor. When you're relying on Bitcoin, no one can stop you. I mean, I can tell you that some of the Bitcoin community is unhappy about this, but they can't stop them. So that's a very good thing that Bitcoin can give you. Not many other cryptocurrencies can give you this assurance that no matter what, no one can stop you from using it. There's this very interesting comment or quote from Hal Finney from 2010. I think that if I'll ask you to raise your hand if you've been here in 2010, I don't think I'm going to see anyone raising his hand. I'm pretty sure that that's not going to happen. So I think probably in 2010 on the Bitcoin Talk forum, I think there were less people than you can fit into this room right now, probably. That's roughly the number of people who knew about Bitcoin in the world right back then. Anyways, so Hal Finney makes this quote. He says, I believe that this will be the ultimate fate of Bitcoin, to be a reserve currency for banks that issue their own digital cash. And most Bitcoin transactions will only occur between banks. That's what he says. Bitcoin transactions by individuals will be as rare as, as Bitcoin-based purchases were back in 2010. So he wasn't very bullish on the idea of people using Bitcoin directly, but he thought it was a great reserve asset. And very interestingly, that's what we're starting to see a lot today too. So I guess what I'm coming here to tell you is Bitcoin sure is a great fit for nation states and for institutions and for public companies and their treasuries. But I think that also maybe what Hal Finney kind of meant here is not just banks, but decentralized banks and decentralized protocols can use Bitcoin too as a reserve currency. I think that makes a lot of sense for a lot of them. And also, yeah, in a multi-chain world, I think the nice thing that we can do, we can say, hey, if you guys like to use MetaMask with Avalanche, then a multi-chain Luna app can allow you to use Terra and get Terra interest rates using your Avalanche wallet, because that's one of the things that multi-chain apps can do. And I think in the same way we can offer that for Bitcoiners as well. So we can build multi-chain apps that use Avalanche, use other L1s, but the interface that users work with are the familiar Bitcoin interfaces that they know how to use. And I think that can be pretty cool. Anyways, that's it for me. Thank you for coming. And thanks a lot.